This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Well, there's a lot of true crime news that have not gotten around to talking about with you. I guess not the least of which is the alibi filing with Brian Koberger, which you sent it to me, so I assume you read that.
I think that could be literally the least of it.
What of the true crime news?
Yeah, you said not the least of it, but
well, I think that's a big I watch everybody online talk about that case, but I don't really talk about that case with anybody very much. I know what they're doing. Do you know what they're doing?
well, they had to file a response to the state's request.
They did.
And did you pick up any hints on the response?
Yeah.
I would go ahead and I would be willing to say, I was going to say I put money on it, but it doesn't seem right to say that. So I would say that it sounds like they don't even plan on putting on a defense.
Correct. That's what that is. And all the legal heads are rolling over it. But the truth is, they're just giving the judge a signal that they don't plan on using a defense. They're gonna do their entire defense case on cross and rebuttal.
That's what it looks like.
And I think that's a smart move. It might be the only move they have. So I would be surprised if they do that. But that's what it looks like,
It said that they planned on elaborating further through the cross-examination of the state's witnesses.
Right. And I don't know how that's going to go. Usually, you don't see it in cases quite this high profile for that to happen. But not putting on a defense is actually a right of defendants. And
oh yeah, well, and the premise of that is that the state hasn't provided a case that needs to be defended.
Yeah, and I don't know how I don't know how their strategy is going right now. I don't know who is behind that. Ultimately, the defendant themselves have to make that call. It just depends on whether he's following the legal advice or if he's haphazardly steering his own boat.
Well, once he stood silent, I have to believe that he was in charge of that.
Yeah, that was a little early on. The thing about standing silent is everybody acted like that was also a big deal. That's literally done every day in this country in every jurisdiction. And it's not actually called standing silent. It's called standing mute.
Either way, the court they simply enter a not guilty plea on your behalf.
Correct.
But it's it's a gesture that a good defense attorney typically probably wouldn't make.
It's okay. So to stand mute, kind of it's usually they're not going to make the plea because they don't feel informed enough yet
that's
about
acknowledging something's happening.
Yeah, that's sort of how people view it. It's really not that. It's really they don't have enough information to be informed about what's happening to plead guilty or not guilty or nolo contendere or anything else. So they just stand mute. And it's not even the fact that it there was all this hubbub about it was kind of confusing to me because the court just enters the plea and everybody moves on.
Right. Well, and it's brought up again in the filing. So the state, I would say requested, but they filed for the defense to provide any alibi that they were going to, and they cited the Idaho statute that requires it or allows for them to do that. And in response, it's simply put that through the cross-examination of the state's witnesses, they'll be able to show that he was somewhere else besides the King Road residence, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the whole alibi, which is not much of one.
Well, okay. If I'm wrong and they are going to put on a defense, which is possible, I will say this. They used a very basic constitutional right to frame this response, and I bought it. But that if I'm wrong, then I bought it and I missed the boat, which may be what they're doing. That is a strategic thing that can happen. But the bottom line is they're simply saying they're preserving his right to remain silent.
Right. You're right. Like I said, they said that, they would, through discovery and through cross-examination, would reveal whatever, right? But that doesn't contradict him, standing silent. It's interesting to me, though, that I don't know. I just see this whole thing as sort of like somebody in denial, and I don't mean his attorney. I'm sure she's got her hands full on all of it, really. I would say that I think that the no defense, it, while I understand the significance of it, it's really not a good strategy. Jurors don't understand it.
I think. Well, you still get an opening argument and a closing argument. It does change the order of some things.
It does.
You're right. It could be confusing. Ultimately, you do it so that you get the last word. I don't know how familiar you are with like this particular strategy. This is not the type of case you do that in normally.
Well, and sometimes, depending on how many rebuttals you end up with and the judge allowing it, it doesn't actually work out that way, right? I know that when the defense doesn't put on a defense, that automatically grants them the final closing before the jury. And so the thought is that in their minds, that's the last thing you're going to go out on, right? Whatever the defense has said. Because the sides alternate, right? The state presents their case, and then if the defense is going to put on a defense, they present their defense. And then there's any number of rebuttals that are allowed by the judge. And then you go to closing. And if the defense doesn't put on a case, then the closing falls to the state first. And then the defense would close after the state. And so I don't think, I feel like that when, I feel like juries miss it, and I would love for a big case to happen where there's not a defense put on and somebody's found not guilty. I haven't really looked recently, but at one point in time, I was trying to find an example of a case where that actually worked out well.
You mean not putting on a defense worked well?
Yeah, like where it actually worked, where like the stance, because the only reason a defense attorney would not put on a defense is because according to, what they're required to do as a defense attorney during a trial would be to basically, it's the stance that the state has not proven a case against the defendant. So therefore, there's no reason for us to defend it, right?
Yeah.
Because there is nothing to defend against. And I don't think jurors, like just your run-of-the-mill average jury, I don't think they get that.
I don't know that most people understand how fast most trials happen.
Oh, right. A lot of them are very quick.
Yeah, like so many trials take place in a day.
Oh, yeah.
And this is not that kind of case overall, just because of the number of steps they have to go through and the number of witnesses they have to call. It would be interesting. What I would be curious about is, say this trial goes, and I haven't seen the estimates on it, so I'm guessing and I'm making stuff up, but we've seen some long trials recently. Say this trial goes 4 weeks. And then the prosecution is responsible for the bulk of that, because you're going to have like a half day opening arguments, and then you're going to for the prosecution, and then a half day for the defense, and then you're going to have all these, prosecution witnesses, and then cross examination and rebuttal witnesses. And depending on the local rules, I think the rebuttal has to happen like in this area, in this place. I believe the way the rebuttal has to go down, it all has to be at one time. And I don't think the defense can call actual rebuttal witnesses, but I'd have to look at it to see how that would go.
Well, if they don't put on a defense, they certainly can't call rebuttal witnesses.
I think they have to impeach, and I think they have to use the prosecution's witnesses against each other, basically. It's like that's how they have to put together their case.
Cross-examination, right?
Yeah. So that is happening. I'm interested to see how that goes. That might be a reason that I covered a piece of that trial, is if the defense, once the prosecution closes out their case, if the defense just rests, meaning they're not going to put on a case.
Well, and typically so the defense rests, and they typically make a motion for like a dismissal of the charges, right?
Right.
And the whole premise is there is no case here, which is like Defense 101, except that is a huge gamble that's going to happen here. It's rarely successful. There's a reason it's rarely successful. It's not and I'm talking about big cases. I don't know about cases that take an hour, right? I don't know about trials that take an hour, but I'm saying, like in the big cases where I've seen the strategy used to not put on a defense. And it's funny and the reason I say that it's not effective is because literally everybody that thinks that sees that happen, they think the defense attorney didn't do their job.
Right. But their job was their strategy and their quote job was all along the way, they were pulling apart everything the prosecution put up.
Through cross-examination. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, like, when the jury sees it, they're like, man, they're not even going to try and defend this. It doesn't click with them that there's nothing to defend against. I think it's a poor trial strategy because the perception that its purpose in not presenting a defense and its perception by like a normal everyday person that would be sitting on a jury are two very different things.
I literally could talk about this all day and I would probably bore you to tears, but
Well, if it does end up being that, so I'll say this, we may never come back to it. It doesn't really matter to me, but I will say that I can just about guarantee you if they don't put on a defense that he will be found guilty, just like every other person that has gone through this. Then, there's always a question in everybody's mind, well, the defense attorney didn't put on a defense. Is that why he was convicted? But, I'm just saying, if I'm going to hedge a bet, that's what I would say. And also, depending on what happens during the state side, which they have all this information way ahead of time, right? And that's how they plan. But whatever the state puts forward, sometimes something's presented that has to be addressed by the defense, right? We saw it in the Murdaugh trial.
Yes.
And so it really depends on what they're going to offer as evidence and how far it goes. And you also have to weigh out the severity of the crime and the outrage and the outcry that it caused, right? I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah, if this comes to a point where there's going to have to be a bombshell in that case for me to come back to it on here.
I would say that a death penalty case without a defense would definitely be worth just mentioning, at least.
If they do that, I might. I think this could also be a red herring by the defense. Like, this could be part of their strategy. Like, defending his right to remain silent is a challengeable thing. And just because the statute in Idaho says you must notice the alibi, his ability to remain silent is preserved by the Constitution, which overrides anything Idaho says anyways. So at this point in time, I think there's not enough here to be super interested in it. But the two things that would make me come back to it are, other than a bombshell, like prosecution or defense, if he were to not put on a defense, I would come back and talk a little bit about that case. Or if he were to testify, I'm definitely coming back and talking about that case.
I can just about guarantee, not that I have anything to guarantee with, I feel very confident we will never hear a word out of him.
Maybe.
I mean, he didn't even plead, so.
I watched a couple of cases down in the South that they're not big cases. We've talked about one or two of them where silence, 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 and then all of a sudden the defendant testified and it worked to a degree, either to hang a jury or to offset something.
No, I mean, I guess I can always be wrong. It's just from everything I've ever seen and watched and absorbed, I have a feeling this trial will go on and we'll never hear a word out of Brian Koberger. I think that the defense more than likely will not put on a defense just based on that, on the alibi statement. And I feel like overall the whole thing is just, it's not that, if he did it, I want him to be found not guilty. I feel like the whole thing is in poor form, like really poor form. The defense legal strategy is just, it's weird and it's bad.
I don't, I don't know enough to question it. I just know that I looked at the document, and I'd seen it, but then you shared it with me. I was like, oh, maybe she wants to talk about that. When I look at it, the first thing I think is they're either setting it up for some kind of challenge or they're literally saying, we're not going to be putting on a defense. And either one of those is interesting to me overall. Like if there's a more intricate, like, legal thing going on there, but it could just be that's how they chose to respond. This is an odd case where you only have a handful of capital defenders in this area that can represent someone in this type of crime. When you have that happen, I think having him as a client, just from the perspective of like what we know about the crimes, is complex. And I think that when you go in there and you sit down and talk to someone like him, you give them some options, I think that's messy. And, it's the opposite of ineffective assistance of counsel, by the way. It's like, this is like probably really effective strategy in some regards. I will be interested to see how it goes. That will be one that, like, personally, I like kind of stare at the screen if they, do those highlights and let you see the court footage and things like that. I can't remember if there's going to be any cameras allowed on this one.
I don't know if they've decided yet or not.
But that would be one, like personally, I'm going to watch it. There's a lot of those going on right now. Like there are multiple cases that at some point we will sort of touch on them in the true crime news section where there have been acquittals of people. So we will have some more trial stuff that comes up as the summer rolls along. But today, I wanted to do one of those mixed episodes. I have a couple more true crime news things I wanted to talk to you about, but then I wanted to move to like one case that's not a case. It's this crazy thing that happened. Did you hear about the skull guy? Have you heard about this whole thing up in Pennsylvania? Okay. So the original headline was something like FBI raids home. Do you remember that whole FBI raids Bullitt County home or something like that?
Yeah.
And I wasn't 100% sure. The home that they raid, the FBI raids the home of a guy named James Knott, who had been purchasing remains online using the alias William Burke. And so he had 40 human skulls and spinal cords that were being used as decorations in his home in Mount Washington, Kentucky. Then it ends up sprawling out into this whole thing. And if you guys want to read something fascinating, it does not seem to be violent crimes going on. It seems to be sort of trafficking of human remains and organs. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah, that's the impression I got.
So the first thing I found on this came out of WDRB July 12th or so. And the article, I guess it's written by staff. I had gone through to try and find a name on it, but nobody put their byline on this. So it was a top story on WDRB. I don't know why they wouldn't want the credit, but it's pretty short. It says a Bullitt County man was arrested Tuesday after FBI agents found dozens of skulls and other human remains in his Mount Washington home. The FBI obtained an arrest warrant for James Knott after an investigation started last year. Court documents show Knott, 39, purchased human remains online using the alias William Berg. Law enforcement viewed Knott's public Facebook page, which included posts about human remains for sale, as recently as June of 2023. A Pennsylvania man, Jeremy Pauley, who, by the way, has his own website, I think it's jeremypauley.com, was selling human remains, including organs and skin, from his home. Pauley purchased the remains, which included hearts, brains, lungs, and 2 fetal specimens, through Facebook Messenger from Candace Chapman, who is a mortician in Arkansas. So Pauley's in Pennsylvania. The mortician is in Arkansas, and we started this in Louisville, Kentucky. Pauley sold and transported with a network of people that included James Knott. The FBI executed a search warrant Tuesday at his home in the 300 block of Love Avenue. Knott was the only person in the apartment, but when an FBI agent asked if anyone else was there, he responded, "Only my dead friends." During the search, FBI agents found about 40 human skulls, spinal cords, femurs, and hip bones. The skulls were decorated and around furniture in the apartment. One of the skulls had a headscarf around it, while another was on Knott's bed. FBI agents also found an AK-47 with loaded magazines, dummy grenades, 2 plates of body armor, and a loaded .38 Special revolver. Neighbors told WDRB News that Knott was considered a loner and kept to himself. Based on the amount of guns the FBI says Knott possessed, they considered themselves lucky nothing worse happened. Knott was previously sentenced to 30 months in prison and 3 years of supervised release for felony violations, including possession of an unregistered destructive device and possession of a firearm by an unlawful user of marijuana. Knott made his first appearance Wednesday in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Kentucky. He remains in federal custody and is being housed in Oldham County. If convicted, Knott could face a maximum of 10 years in prison. What do you think of this guy?
The remark about only his dead friends, he knew exactly why they were there. Honestly, when I look at the guy's mugshot, I'm surprised. The most surprising thing is that he's younger than I am.
Yeah, he's younger than I am too by quite a few years, and I look a lot younger.
It doesn't seem like he should be younger than me. It's weird. So that kind of blew my mind for a second. And then my other thought was, these people live their whole lives, and then I don't know how they don't mention like the mortician being in trouble.
She is. Do you want to know more about this case?
Oh, yeah, you can tell me. I just didn't see it.
So I went hunting on this one because I figured it was, to be quite honest, it's sort of a nothing burger in a way.
A what?
A nothing burger, like there's not much to it.
Burger. Yeah. But it's fascinating, though.
The FBI choosing the movie line of "We're lucky nothing worse happened" is terrible because that guy didn't talk to people. He didn't want anything to do with people, and to the point that he went online and bought dead friends.
Right. I think that they meant when they went in to get him, though.
Yeah, I understand that, but that guy had his stuff put away. He wasn't interested in whatever they were talking about there. He didn't want anything to do with the FBI, but he wasn't going to go crazy when they arrived, I don't think. Local 21 News covered this. A guy named Tyler Jeske picked it up. The thing is, what I just read you is from July, and all the information I read about this case comes from July. That's when they sort of made it make headlines, but the original origins of this case go back much further. The Tyler Jeske's article, is from June 15th, 2023. and it's out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And it's got the mugshot of Jeremy Pauley, the guy that I was talking about. And he reminds me of the serial killer in North Carolina named John Lawson, who changed his name to Pazuzu Algarad. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, he's got that kind of like face tattoo stuff going, and he has like a number of he's got gauges in his ears. Anyway, just sort of the overall look, and so the right side of the guy's face is tattooed, but his eye is done, and he had metal spikes in his head. It's very interesting.
His eye is what?
His eye is tattooed black.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was shocked by that. Here's what this article says. A plea deal has been reached in the case surrounding stolen human remains that prosecutors said were bought and sold by Cumberland County man Jeremy Pauley. CBS 21 obtained the court documents, and the plea agreement was filed on June 14, 2023. According to the agreement, Pauley has been charged in multiple federal indictments, but pleading guilty to 2 counts. One is conspiracy to commit interstate transportation of stolen property. The second one is interstate transportation of stolen property. The agreement states that Pauley could face up to 15 years in prison, a $500,000 fine, and 3 years of supervised release. Pauley must also admit his guilt in open court. He has been connected to at least 2 federal indictments. His first arrest happened in August of 2022. This was after East Pennsboro Township Police received a complaint about human body parts being sold at a home in Enola. According to court records, Pauley was purchasing the parts by Facebook from a woman in Arkansas named Candace Scott, and police said they found a skull, 3 brains, 4 hands, and a number of other organs. The Federal Bureau of Investigation said those remains were taken from a mortuary that was connected to the University of Arkansas, and on here they have Candace Scott's mugshot as well as Jeremy Pauley's old mugshot. According to the U.S. Attorney from the Middle District of Pennsylvania, Pauley is one of 6 people charged in connection with trafficking stolen human remains. Authorities said those body parts were stolen from the Anatomical Gifts Program at Harvard Medical School. That indictment stated that Pauley received human skin from people in Boston that he allegedly was tanning and turning into leather. The former morgue manager was among those charged. So, all right. So then Jeremy Pauley comes and, he's got a plea hearing. That was...
Well, I'm a little bit confused because there's actually news that just came out at 9:49 a.m. about his preliminary hearing being rescheduled for the 7th time. I don't know that it's on the same charges, though.
It's been pushed back again. So Candace pled.
But why would they be having a preliminary hearing after he's pled guilty?
He has multiple federal indictments.
I see.
The idea is in federal court, he's going to show up and he's going to plead out to the deal at the preliminary hearing. What's happened here, in my opinion, is that I believe there is another indictment coming down for these people. That's one of the reasons I brought them up. I saw where they were looking at taking her to trial, Candace Chapman Scott is going to trial. This has all been going on for a year. And the reason I bring all of this up, you would think something like this is hidden away, right? Like it's something.
Well, by what do you mean?
Like they're acting like they uncovered this thing.
Oh, I guess.
Okay. Jeremy Pauley has a website where he states he runs the Memento Mori Museum out of Pennsylvania. And he literally is displaying human remains on this website. He talks about federal law, state law, and import regulations. He talks about plastination, which is the chemical process of conserving anatomical specimens. So basically, you replace all the body fluids with a synthetic polymer to make human remains handleable. This is not hidden. This is literally on his own website at jeremyleepauley.com.
And he's talking about laws
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how
yeah.
he's not breaking them. I guess he
No,
didn't
no, no, no,
realize
no,
that
no.
by
No.
selling them.
He puts the federal law, the state law, and the import law, import regulations, I guess, on a page. Like he's got like Alabama through Mississippi, where you can just click on it and you can see what those states say about it. I just thought it was fascinating because, this guy can't win. But one of the creepy things about it is I can't tell if these pictures are real or like real human remains or if he made them up. Did you click on the site?
Well, I was trying to, but it took me somewhere else.
I was just shocked that he's sort of just hiding in plain sight. And he's selling this stuff on Facebook.
And people are buying it. Oh my.
Yeah.
And he's,
He literally has the Poly Institute of Preservation as his like job title. He says on here
seem
that
to have anything under federal law.
if you click on him, you're saying it doesn't go down any further? That seems right.
No. So he has state law and federal law, but when I clicked on federal law, there was nothing there.
Yeah. One of the things he talked about doing was tanning human tattoos to preserve the artwork for family members.
Well, that actually, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you shared this with me.
Goodbye, search history. Goodbye.
And, I wouldn't get into anybody's business like that as far as like if you had a loved one pass away and, they said it was okay and you wanted to do it for whatever reason. But we're talking about like the brokerage happening here, right?
We are. We're definitely talking about that part. Yeah.
And so to me, that's like super different. And I have no idea how this came about. You said he was selling them on Facebook, and it seems like there was a morgue manager at Harvard, the Harvard Medical School. Was that right?
Yeah. They were in charge of managing Harvard Medical School's anatomical gift program.
Right. And so that would be like when people die and they leave their body parts to be studied or whatever, I guess.
Correct.
And so they, when they, I guess, had extras. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was like a $4,000 sum here. Like that's the only amount of money I've seen kind of thrown out. And I believe I don't know what her name was. Hold on. The Candace Scott person was paid $4,000 for a half a human head, a whole human head minus the skull cap, 3 human brains with skull caps, a human heart, a human liver, a human lung, human kidneys, a human female pelvis, a piece of human torso, including a nipple, and 4 human hands.
Yes.
For the price of $4,000.
Yes, that's what's been bandied about here, like in terms of what is and isn't a crime. It's so weird. Harvard responded to all this, by the way. Do you want to hear the response?
Sure.
Okay. So if you go on CBS, they cover the story briefly. Again, it's WBZ up there covered it, but they all just said, that's CBS Boston for people who don't know. They just credit it to staff. They don't credit to any particular byline. On June 14th, 2023, they covered Harvard issuing a response. Harvard Medical School in Cambridge is responding to federal prosecutors' allegations that its morgue manager, a gentleman named Cedric Lodge, was selling stolen body parts online. In the message titled "An Abhorrent Betrayal," Deans George Daly and Edward Hundert write that the alleged actions are morally reprehensible. We are appalled to learn that something so disturbing could happen on our campus, a community dedicated to healing and serving others, the dean said. The reported incidents are a betrayal of Harvard Medical School and, most importantly, each of the individuals who altruistically chose to will their bodies to HMS through the anatomical gift program to advance medical education and research. Prosecutors say that Cedric Lodge stole heads, brains, skin, bones, and other human remains without the knowledge or permission of HMS, removed those remains from the morgue in Massachusetts, and transported them to his residence in New Hampshire. Harvard said it worked with federal authorities to figure out which anatomical donors may have been affected. They have set up a web page for donor families in light of the news. And then they put the full statement in there, which is, I'm not going to read the full statement because it feels moral outragey to me. But it does give options to family members where they can go on and find out, are they affected? And there's information for the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Victim and Witness Unit.
I have seen, just sort of briefly, I don't look into this kind of stuff. I have seen where there's not as much dignity in like donating your body to science as one might think, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it, like I said, I haven't looked into it that much, but my thought is like, you're not doing what you think you're doing if you do that, right? Because it just doesn't seem like it means as much to the people that actually end up having to deal with your body, right?
Yeah.
It's a nice, like, prominent thought behind it, but then you've got people who have dead bodies they don't know what to do with. That's what I've seen happen.
Well, and like you said, which number did you mention? $4,000 or something like that?
Yeah.
So I think one of the numbers I saw here was $11,000, and another one was $8,000. So we're not talking millions of dollars here that are going on. Like totaling all up, what I've seen is something like 50 grand. And look, I'm not defending these people, but I will say this: I think it's been delayed because they're having trouble with the elements of the crime making sense. Because I'm not entirely certain that they broke any laws.
Well, and he's pled guilty to something.
Right? Well, so no, he is not allocated yet. So there has been a plea deal that I will note that the only people that released the information about the plea deal is the U.S. Attorney's Office.
What were those charges?
Those were charges of interstate conspiracy to engage in interstate commerce with stolen goods was one of them, and then interstate transportation of stolen goods. Those are the two charges. I'm not entirely certain that this is going to go down the way they think it was. Now, this was reported by a tipster back a long time ago, like over a year ago, and the cops went in and did this big search warrant, and it got very sensational very quickly because it involved human remains. But you said something interesting, and I want to know what you like. Do you think they've done some major crazy crime ring thing here with all these resources that they're chasing?
I don't know. Like I said, I don't really look into that very much, but for whatever reason, and this kind of illustrates that, not with Jeremy, but with the other guy.
Cedric? Or
no,
James
Knott
Knott?
Guy.
James
Knott
Knott.
Guy. Yeah, okay, so, he bought a lot of kind of random body parts, and he had them as decorations, right? In his house when he was arrested. And so there's a market for it. I don't know that there's like a huge market for it, and I don't really know a whole lot about that.
Well, just generally speaking, I think that this keeps getting delayed because so you're doing an open plea, but there's a recommendation by the prosecution. They probably want something ridiculous for this. Now, I'm not defending what any of these people did. I'm just not entirely certain that what they did constitutes some major crime or all of these resources towards it. If they've clearly only been able to go after them and get them to plea out to some interstate commerce issues.
Right. I definitely think the person that served as the broker, they're probably going to have some issues. But like I don't know enough about those laws in particular. It seems like a very niche market, right?
Yeah.
As far as who's interested in that kind of thing, and you've got to kind of find just the right people. But if you believe everything you read on the internet, which I would not necessarily advise anyone to do. But if you believe stuff on the internet, like there can be these big rings of human tissue and organ trafficking that happens, right? And it's worth big money on the black market or whatever. I don't know how real any of that stuff is, right?
Yeah, no, I just found the level of mainstream media coverage about this case fascinating from the perspective that it just didn't feel like, it didn't feel real that this is what we're like focusing on to, be making this sensational.
Right. And I think it's the level of depravity.
I have no judgment of these people at all. Like, I don't have anything that makes me go, these people are terrible or anything like that. I don't even think much about it.
Well, I don't either, but I would say that it's a pretty neutral thing to say that it's not a great idea to have actual human remains decorating your home.
Yeah, but okay.
So I'm not necessarily comparing that to like other things. I'm just saying like it's not really great taste to keep somebody's body in your house as a decoration, especially something
I 100% agree with you. I was just going to say, it's weird to me how mainstream media treats those things. It becomes a whole weird thing, but those are not the only dumb things that humans are doing in our true crime news episode. I have two left. And I know like we're kind of like running late in time. I'm going to start with the shortest one. This is made headlines a bunch of different places. I think the best way to go with it is NBC News has it. And I think you heard about this. So you ever go into a restaurant and you forget something or leave something behind when you leave?
I haven't in a long time, but yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with it happening.
Like, so for most people, that's a giant pain in the butt if you leave your backpack or your purse or your phone these days behind. Like, it changes your life for a few minutes while you're trying to figure out what was going on. Well, there's a guy in Franklin, Tennessee. His name is Camilo Hurtado Campos. He left his phone behind in a restaurant. You can read this on NBC News. I think Dennis Romero had it. New York Post had an interesting article that's a dubious source at best. So this is like one of those situations where the employees go through the phone. They're probably looking for the owner, also kind of like swiping through, being people. The Franklin Police Department end up arresting Camilo Hurtado Campos because the phone gets turned over from the restaurant. Instead of going back to Mr. Campos, it goes to the police.
So he probably should have kept a better eye on that phone if he wanted his secret to remain, huh?
Yeah. So, or locked it, or, some of the 9,000 things you can do.
I think that is one of the, so the case is terrible, right? But the fact that, this unlocked phone got left behind, it shows you, how casual this dude is about, this terrible stuff he's doing.
Yeah, I cannot even imagine, in my head, why do you keep this? Why do you do this? Why do you keep this, sort of recording of it all? What they found is a little bit about Camilo Campos in Franklin, Tennessee. Number one, he is a soccer coach by all the descriptions that I found of him. I don't know exactly what that means, if it's for a league or a local organization or a school or what. I tried to do some digging into this, and I'm sure at some point more of this is going to come out. But on the phone, what the restaurant workers found that made them want to go and take the phone to the police was sexual assaults of 10 victims. Detectives going through the phones, the videos and photos on the phone, said they saw 10 victims, and they were able to identify 2 of them with the help of local schools. But there were hundreds of videos and photos on the device, and it appeared that the victims were all between the ages of 9 and 17. the children in the videos were in an unconscious state, and they may not have even realized that they had been victims. What they're saying is depicted here is children being drugged and then fondled or assaulted, for lack of a better word. Now, the way this gets written up is it gets written up as child rape and the sexual exploitation of a minor. This is a very small area out here where they live, although Franklin, I will say, has about 80, 90,000 people in it. They were saying that he would use his job as a popular local soccer coach to lure these boys to his home. He would frequent nearby playgrounds in both neighborhoods where he had lived. He would approach kids and he would recruit them as, quote, players on his team. After gaining their trust, he would invite them to his house and he would drug them. And then, according to the allegations, he would sexually assault them and rape them. This is all because he left his phone behind.
And he had evidence
phone.
of that stuff on there.
Yeah, this is bizarre to me.
It's also kind of like divine intervention.
It is. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Like I was like scrolling through. He had a court appearance this week, and I have a feeling that they're going to be tacking on some more charges for him. I cannot believe that he was doing this, and that like all of these things coming together is bizarre. They started to find these kids, by the way. Like I said, 2 of them. I think it's more than that now.
I think they're coming forward once it sort of got out.
Yeah, there were 5 or 6 kids that came forward beyond the ones they had started to identify. But this was all at a local pizza shop in Tennessee. And you're right, it is some element of divine intervention.
Because he went unchecked forever and ever, and then he left his phone behind by accident. And because it happened to be civilians that got it, right? It's so funny because they don't. You don't have to have a warrant or anything if you're just a person looking to return somebody's phone, right?
Yep.
And so, having found the information, the people did the right thing, which was they went to the police about it. I'm sure it must have been horrifying to the extent that you're going to turn some random, which I don't know if they figured out who it was, if he was a regular or what, but they knew who this guy was, or the police found him. And I would have to see something really terrible on someone's phone. Not that I would be looking, but in order to turn him in, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the Post and someone else interviewed an employee there, and he described it. This is Marco's Pizza, by the way. It's in Franklin, Tennessee. June 22nd, someone literally just walked up to him and said, hey, this phone was on the table. The worker opened it and flipped through to see if they recognized anybody in the first couple of pictures. Immediately came across images that showed an adult male that were engaged in sexual activity with what appeared to be juveniles. Called the police. Police took the phone, and then Campos, the owner of the phone, shows up at Marco's the next day and asked a different employee if anyone had turned in the phone. And he clearly wanted to get this phone back. Campos gives the employee a phone number where he could be reached and left. And that clerk snapped a photo of his license plate. So he's been identified at multiple steps there. And then,
wow, that was so smart.
Yeah. So this is June 23rd. He gets arrested the same day. Investigators, they use the photo from the license plate to match Campos to the car and then to verify that that's who's in the images. Apparently, it was a surprise to him when he gets arrested. So during an interview with the police, he not only admits that the cell phone is his, but he acknowledges that he knew those images were on the phone. And they don't go any further as to tell us if there were more admissions, so to speak, during these interviews. And he did not have an attorney listed at that time, but he was held and now he's starting to appear in court. They did find one of the boys is now 12. So some of the images were older. And they are still asking that anyone in Tennessee particularly in the Nashville area and the Franklin area. If you know anything about Campos or things that he was doing, to come forward and talk to the investigators there locally. And I mean, this is fascinating to me for a number of reasons, not in a good way. I'm glad that he's been caught. I hate that he did this. In case, because we have several Tennessee folks that listen in here, in case you happen to know anything about this or whatever, the number directly to the investigators is 615-794-2513. That's 615-794-2513. Just tell them that you have information about Camilo Hurtado Campos.
Whenever something like this happens, that last account you gave about how he acknowledged the phone was his and he talked with investigators and it wasn't really clear if anything else came out. So my brain splits in half, right?
Yeah.
Because, I don't want anybody that's hurting children in any capacity to get away with it at all, right? So, I'm glad he didn't have the knowledge to, not say anything. But, it immediately kicks in like, oh, that's a mistake. Don't talk to the police. Don't acknowledge the phone is yours, blah, 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 blah. And I catch myself doing that. And I'm like, oh, I don't want this guy to get away with it. It's weird how my brain does that, I think.
Yeah.
It's two different things.
Man, when it comes to kids and crimes against children, I don't know what happens. It's not that my brain splits in half like you were describing, but I pretty much automatically, I want to shut everything down and just, send it to a judge. I don't want to have anything to do with like stuff related to children. And that's partly just like, being a parent myself. It's terrifying in so many different ways to think about somebody getting away with this. And these are, like they were saying, these videos, I think they're like 2019, 2020, 2021. So it's kind of during the pandemic he was doing this stuff. That makes it worse for me, taking advantage of like whoever he was taking advantage of here. And just overall, the fact that he was able to get away with more than one instance is terrible, because that means, you've got kids that are terrified who aren't talking to the adults in their lives. And this guy really does become a predator at that point. And, his ability to intimidate them and all the things that happen there just infuriate me. I hope that he gets all the help that he needs and spends all the time that he needs behind bars, because I'm pretty sure the way this went down, this is a life in prison situation.
Well, it should be. And, while it'd be great if he got help, sometimes you have to wonder if that's possible, really, or if it's probable, I guess. Sometimes people are just, really far gone. And I have a feeling he's going to probably plead out, and based on just sort of the way he's acted so far in the case.
Yeah, that probably is where this is headed. I hope he doesn't put these poor kids through a trial. And I don't have any of his attorney information, so I can't even comment in that direction. I have one more crazy thing. This is one of those cases that like sort of sprawls out of, I think the Daily Beast had it, and maybe there were several news articles about this guy. I'm bringing him up today, like for a number of reasons. You want to talk about one more?
Sure.
Okay. This is Daily Beast had this on July 12th from a guy named Justin Rohrlich. It's a good article. It's in their crime and justice section. And the headline of the article is "Ex-Spy Accused of Putting CIA Hopeful Through Sordid Secret Sex Training." And he filed this under the column "The Point of No Return." And it just says, former clandestine officer Sean Wiggins allegedly assaulted the woman repeatedly, and what he assisted was a covert program to train her to use her body as a weapon. A former CIA officer allegedly duped an aspiring covert operative into believing she was part of a quasi-official recruitment program for budding spies, then coerced her into repeatedly having sex with them so she could learn how to use her body, quote, as a weapon. The woman claimed she was told it would replicate the purported off-limits work every CIA officer was inevitably called on to do, and that the techniques she picked up would become a part of her technical skill set. But the fabricated and extended training exercise did nothing to help the young cybersecurity specialist realize her dream of joining the agency, and instead groomed her for ongoing sexual abuse, ultimately landing her in a psychiatric facility. This is all from a lawsuit that was obtained by the Daily Beast. And there's a 58-page complaint laying out a lot of crazy shenanigans this guy was up to. The accusations are against Sean Wiggins, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sodarex, an upstate New York data analytics consulting firm and provider of active shooter training. His corporate bio says he served as a clandestine service officer for the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, identifying and engaging key foreign national stakeholders critical to U.S. interests. He also worked for the Department of Defense Inspector General as an external affairs officer. The company says its leadership included several other ex-feds. There's a former FBI special agent in charge, a former Department of Justice staff attorney, a former Navy SEAL who had been working for the CIA. The CIA did not respond to the Daily Beast request for verifications of Wiggins' past employment, but he is regularly cited in local media as having worked for the agency. He has twice run for local office as a Democrat and as a conservative. The woman is identified here as Jane Doe. She's identified in the complaint only as Jane Doe. Wiggins told the woman that when she wasn't using sex to get information out of enemy targets, she could use it to develop stronger connections between herself and other operatives. Specifically, according to the filing, Wiggins said that the bond between case officers on missions together was such that it wasn't unusual to form sexual relationships with colleagues. And it goes on and on and on. I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but it is terrible. Did you read some of the articles on this thing?
I did. I'm glad they didn't name her, and I certainly don't want to victim shame, but how desperate do you have to be to buy that steaming pile?
Yeah, so they detail it here. This is Wiggins. He sets her up. She thought that she was looking at her dream career. According to Daily Beast and the complaint itself, Wiggins gained Doe's trust, turned it against her, and assaulted her again and again. She brought the complaint against Wiggins and Sodarex under New York State's Adult Survivors Act, which provides sexual assault victims a 1-year look-back window, which would end in late November, during which cases that otherwise would have expired under the statute of limitations can be reopened. As of May, there have been about 130 lawsuits filed under this act. And there's a couple of famous defendants in there, including James Toback, Mike Tyson, and former President Trump. So that's how they get this in front of people. The rundown of the statement of facts sort of leads to this story. Basically, the allegations against Wiggins can be traced back to August 2017, when Jane Doe was hired at Sodarex. She reported exclusively to Wiggins, who led her to believe her work at Sodarex, along with his connections, would prepare her for a job at the CIA. Because of the nature of the work she was interested in, she understood that the position would require her to trust Wiggins and that she may be exposed to unique situations outside of the standard 9-to-5 office job. She graduated from college in 2009, and as she entered her mid-20s, she decided she wanted to join the CIA. So to bolster her chances, she got a certificate in international cyber conflict. She followed the advice of a professor there who had said some practical work experience would look good on her resume. That spring, she spotted a blurb in the local paper about an upcoming ribbon-cutting ceremony at Sodarex, which was going to be a new cybersecurity firm in Saratoga Springs. She was intrigued by Wiggins' CIA background. She read about it on the website there. So she attended the ceremony and introduced herself. Before she even had a chance to reach back out to him, Wiggins had found her on LinkedIn and messaged her to arrange a meeting. The two met 3 times at a local restaurant, but no job offer seemed to be forthcoming, according to the complaint. After 2 months, Doe assumed she hadn't passed Wiggins' informal interview process, but as late summer rolled around, Doe ran into Wiggins by chance at a Saratoga Springs coffee shop. She reiterated how interested she was in the CIA career, and this time, Wiggins expressed interest in hiring her. He assured Doe that working for him would be a gateway into her working for the CIA, and he began to control Doe and separate her from others, all under the guise of training. To begin with, he insisted Doe only communicate with him via privately via WhatsApp. And then taking quotes out of the complaint, Doe understood that she needed to learn about communications which could not be traced as part of her training, so she was not concerned about the unusual communication style. Meanwhile, Wiggins had permitted her to take occasional babysitting jobs to earn money, but then prohibited her from any work that might impinge on these training exercises. Wiggins told Jane Doe he planned to shape her into the ideal recruit and demanded that she be on call 24 hours a day. On one occasion, he said, "You, my dear, are an agent in waiting." Toward the end of September, Doe says Wiggins told her about the off-limits training he planned to conduct. She responded enthusiastically, trusting Wiggins that it would simulate actual CIA techniques. The tone of the messages soon started to shift, with Wiggins then beginning to compliment Doe's hair and asking if she'd ever been a model, according to the complaint. Still, there was enough talk about tradecraft to keep Doe interested. In October 2017, Wiggins told Doe that working with her put him back in agency mode and offered her a tour of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, the complaint states, noting that Wiggins told Doe he had previously worked with a guy who managed the technology that brought down disgraced FBI agent Robert Hansen, who was caught spying for the Russians. "You've crossed the point of no return," Wiggins allegedly messaged Doe, which the complaint says Doe took to mean she was really being trained to join the CIA. Later that month, according to the complaint, Wiggins informed Doe she was ready to go to the next level. This meant becoming his covert traveling companion. He dangled trips to London, Paris, and Switzerland, and then wrote to her on WhatsApp, "I am your handler now." The word handler being a reference to a case officer who is in charge of managing a human asset. He also taught Doe how to leave unobtrusive chalk markings in public places to leave signals for other spies. One denoted a meeting, while another denoted an emergency meeting. Doe claims that Wiggins told her. A third mark signified immediate extraction. "Is it a request for extraction or to tell someone else they're going to be extracted?" Doe messaged Wiggins. "Yes," Wiggins replied. Phase 2 of training began in December 2017. Doe says that Wiggins told her she was now ready for this part of her training, and he said that, "I saw an intense side of you. I like that." Wiggins said he'd be stepping up the training to even higher levels, but she still needed some education, and he planned to conduct some testing to see how she reacted. That same day, the complaint says that Wiggins messaged Doe saying, "I've been amazed how potent, very well-trained women can use their bodies as a weapon very effectively." "I bet," Doe responded. "This decimated our Marines in Russia, had to develop special training to counteract, cost millions. So I don't say this lightly." "I'm working on developing you," Wiggins allegedly wrote to Doe, "and I think you're going to be a superior officer. I need to get more self-discovery out of you as a colleague." Wiggins spoke of his own CIA recruitment, which he said involved a female CIA officer who used sexual tactics to test Wiggins' loyalty and unwavering dedication to the CIA. Doe says Wiggins told her she was in my hands now and to get ready for a wild, wonderful, and fantastic ride. Soon, according to Doe's lawsuit, Wiggins would assault her for the first time. On January 31st, 2018, Doe accompanied Wiggins on what he described as a big trip to New York City. He gave Doe his credit card to check them into the room. She was surprised to learn there was only one room booked. So Doe assumed there had been a mistake and secured a second room. Upon hearing this, Wiggins became visibly irritated, assailing Doe for having ruined everything. Wiggins then went to his room to, quote, meet with a contact, end quote. He claimed to have been involved with Doe's supposed CIA recruitment. When Doe later met up with Wiggins at the hotel bar, he told her that his CIA connection still had doubts about her commitment to the process. He pointed out a man nearby and indicated he was undercover CIA and told Doe to kiss him on the cheek as a signal to the man that she was committed to being recruited. Doe then went up to Wiggins' room for a conference call with Soderex's COO, Wiggins' brother. She says she briefly returned to her own room, only to be summoned back by Wiggins to his room, who answered the door in nothing but boxers and a t-shirt. He then forced himself on a shocked Doe. Doe did not know how to respond and believed she was being tested, So even though she did not want to have sex with him, she froze. And after Wiggins was done sexually assaulting her, he told her to put her clothes back on, and that he telling her simply, "Very good, you can get dressed now." This complaint goes on to talk about, and the article, they go on to talk about she was struggling to make ends meet, and that he finally gives her a check in March of 2018. She was really running through hard times herself, and he had continued to sexually assault her. And then she got a letter confirming her employment at Soderex so she could help her qualify for a car loan. It confirmed that she was supposed to be making $50,000. This guy is a terrible person. What did you think about all of this?
I think he's a terrible person. I agree. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he's not a former CIA agent.
No, my guess is this guy is. He's probably tied in some way, and that gives him the ability to do this.
I don't know that. I don't know that Doe would know any different. Right?
No, I don't think she would either.
And the confidence on this guy. I'm a little disappointed. Now, I thought maybe it was a lack of evidence, but as you kind of went through it, it seems like there is some evidence. So right now, the allegations against him are in a civil lawsuit, right?
Yeah, this is her. She's suing under the Adult Survivors Act of New York State, basically suing him for assaulting her.
Right. And so I'm not sure. I don't know why there isn't some sort of criminal investigation happening here, because
there's an update this morning on this case, if you want.
Oh, really?
So this is a short update. Same guy, Justin Rollrich. It's also from Daily Beast. And it just says, a former CIA clandestine service officer accused of putting an aspiring operative through a sordid training program centered on servicing him sexually is now nowhere to be found. The upstate New York data analytics firm Sean Wiggins co-founded confirms that he has apparently vanished. So the attorneys representing Jane Doe, they've hired a skip tracer trying to find him.
Well, so this guy definitely needs to, I don't know that be taken down is the best word, because he didn't kill anybody, but what he did was very manipulative and very damaging, right?
Yeah.
He won't stop. Like, this will be his,
This will be a speed bump, yeah.
And, oh my gosh, he must be so convincing. Like, there's so many flags in this story, and it's just kind of like I want to sit there with my, mouth just kind of drop to the floor, right? Because it's like, wait, what? Especially when she wasn't being paid, and she wanted a job so bad that she was willing to just believe anything this guy said. He obviously realized that and made the most out of the situation for his own personal gain. He had absolutely no interest in ever helping her do anything, I'm sure, because anytime I see private security firm, all this,
it's had multiple descriptions, but yeah.
Well, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's because of the variance of what they've talked about. I'm just like, this guy is doing nothing but scamming people. That's what it read like to me, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but it's very rare to ever actually come across anybody that's an actual either present or former CIA agent. They don't typically advertise that.
It doesn't come up at all in conversation, though.
And so, when you see it, oh, that's probably not true.
Well, so this last part, it goes straight into bad movie plot, by the way. So that's where we're headed. We're now, because I feel terrible that this happened to her. I'm separating this last part because it really does. It skews so far into crazy town with this whole thing of trying to serve Wiggins these papers. So the attorneys representing Wiggins' accuser are going through the process right now. And if you want to pull this up. The Daily Beast has it. It's got the whole thing kind of laid out there. But there's a guy named John Bell that represents Wiggins. He told the Daily Beast that he couldn't comment on any pending litigation. He had previously told Sarasota Springs newspaper, the Daily Gazette, that Wiggins denies the allegations against him, and he expects that he will be fully exonerated. Soderex's general counsel was unable to be reached on Tuesday. A call to the company connected to an automated recording system saying that the number was now out of service. An email sent to Soderex for comment about Wiggins, whose bio has been deleted, and is asking about his possible whereabouts went unanswered. 4 days past the court-imposed deadline, Doe's lawyers have not been able to serve him. They've asked for an additional 45 days. The lawsuit was filed on July 11th, after which Judge Lisa Headley ordered the documents to be served personally on Wiggins and Soderex by July 21st. Attorneys Megan Goddard and Siobhan Klassen, they engaged the process server to take care of the task, according to a motion submitted in court by Klassen. On the morning of July 19th, the process server performed a skip trace on Wiggins to pull up his last known address. Although he worked in New York, and was thought to have resided there, the results came back showing an address in Inglewood, Colorado. When the process server showed up the next day, Wiggins was not there. The resident of the home stated that he moved into the address approximately 1 month ago and does not know anyone related to the situation. That's in an email from the process server to Doe's lawyers that's in this. That afternoon, Doe's lawyers emailed Bell to ask if he would be willing to accept the service, but they received an out-of-office auto reply informing them that Bell would be away until the end of July without access to email or phones, according to the motion. The next day, the process server went to Soderex's listed address on the 4th floor of an office building in Schenectady, New York, according to an email string included in all these court filings by Doe's lawyers. There, they found that a different business occupied the space, and no one on the premises had ever heard of Wiggins. The company, the suite number, the floor, as described, does not exist. We cannot serve something that does not exist, said the process server. She tried a second address for Soderex, in which she described as a huge 6-story building that is Saratoga Springs. As per the lobby attendant, the subject was not located there. They went to the suite, and they spoke to a woman who's employed by a local accounting firm that has occupied the suite for the last 3 years. So at a crossroads, Godden and Klassen had no choice but to serve Soderex via the Secretary of State's office. On July 21st, the two attorneys had the process server contact the U.S. Postal Service to formally request the most recent address for defendant Wiggins. Upon her request, she was informed that this process takes significant time. Doe's lawyers are now asking the court for an additional 45 days to serve Wiggins, hoping they'll be able to locate the absent defendant so the lawsuit can proceed. Wiggins' formal response to Doe's suit is due by August the 18th. All of this is bad movie plot.
Yeah, it really is.
If he's actually a clandestine services officer and has the experience that and they will never find him.
Well, but come on, if he was actually a clandestine CIA former operative, he wouldn't have done this. I'm
just saying. I understand we're at a crossroads, but those in my mind
I feel
are
like
parallel.
the government could find him.
There are a couple of ways they could find him. Yeah. I just think this whole thing is bonkers.
It is bonkers. And, so I was curious. I was confused because you don't really ask an attorney of record to accept service, right?
Well, I couldn't figure out what they meant by that. That's another reason I said bad movie plot, because if they haven't served him, how is he representing him?
He was representing him on something, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, an attorney of record, and it sounded like it had something to do with this matter, right? I don't know what, but I would have just served them because he's made a statement. I don't know. I'm sure they explored that avenue. I was just really surprised because typically once you have representation that has made an appearance and hasn't, gotten removed through a proper judicial channel, like they still have to accept the service of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seemed like they got an out of the. I mean, I haven't. If there is something criminal, and he was representing him on that, a lot of times, criminal defense attorneys don't really do civil litigation and vice versa or whatever. But I don't know. This seems like really strange. It's going to end up being that like this guy doesn't even exist. He's a completely different person.
I think it will be something like that, actually.
I do too.
I noticed that, I thought about this like a little too late. I think somebody needs to check and make sure John Bell is not the same guy, because that's weird for an attorney to also just.
That it is weird. I can't really figure out what's going on there. And this, obviously the lawsuit has been filed with the court, but the service on the other party hasn't occurred yet. And so really they can't get anywhere with it until that happens. I'm sure that the victim is filling all kinds of stuff.
Interesting. I did find John Bell. He's real. So check this out. John Bell began his career at one of the largest litigation firms in New York. Despite gaining vast experience in multi-million-dollar claims, Mr. Bell was dissatisfied with not being able to select his own clients, and therefore sometimes had personal conflicts in handling cases we believed to be on the wrong side. Thereafter, he started his own law firm, which allowed him to select his own cases. John Bell became interested in federal employee litigation as he discovered the need for federal employees to have strong, knowledgeable representation. John Bell loves David and Goliath type scenarios and always roots for the underdog. Most of his cases involve an employee fighting their management and taking on an entire federal agency.
And we're sure that's the same guy? Yeah, so he probably dropped him as a client.
Yeah, or was involved in a previous litigation. Not really this one.
Right. It just seems weird that he would have commented on it, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is. I hope if they don't get this guy served, okay, I hope it's at least enough to like make him stop.
Yeah, I do too.
I can't even now, people that are scared run, right?
Yeah.
People that are not, people that are dignified and, maintain their position of what they did, that have integrity of any sort, they don't run. It bothers me because he's got to be just very convincing, right? He clearly preys on naivety, right?
Yeah.
Whichever, in this particular case, it was a woman who wanted a job, and she had this chance encounter with this dude, and like it didn't go anywhere. And then she had another chance encounter with him, and then like all this terrible stuff happened to her, and he was giving her all kinds of garbage information. And she was lapping it up with a spoon because she really wanted, this career goal to happen for her. And so he's going to take that and adjust it to any situation he's in. But the victims are always going to be the same kind of people. And they're essentially prey, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I hate people like that. He's
allegedly. This isn't a lawsuit. We're basically reading from a lawsuit in the article surrounding the lawsuit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, so if he did, if all the allegations were to be true, regardless if it's him or anybody else, he's preying on the, I don't want to say weaker, but he's preying on, on manipulating a situation. And I hate it when people do things like that.
Yeah. I would
especially
agree
when
with
people suffer, right? When you've got this, according to the lawsuit, this woman with really good intentions trying to get herself ahead. And, this guy's just lapping it up, and, he's taking advantage of it, and he'll do it again. And like, I do understand that some people actually, they do that kind of thing. And they must get something out of it, right? I feel like it would be an incredible for one thing, I couldn't keep up with all the lies, and then like trying to juggle, and it would be just like an incredible waste of time, right? But some people, that's their actual prerogative, which I guess would have to be because he was living this for months, right?
Oh yeah, I don't like folks like this, and I don't understand folks like.
Did you see the picture of him?
Yeah.
Did you think that he looked like anybody?
What do you mean? Like someone famous?
Uh-huh.
Judge Mathis, maybe?
A little bit. Oh.
I don't know. He's got a pretty generic look. Why? I looked at videos of him too.
Did he look like Wayne Brady?
Some of his pictures, he has a little bit of a look like Wayne Brady. Yeah.
When I looked at it at first, I don't know exactly what was it on, like the New York Post or something.
Daily Beast had the main picture. I didn't see any New York Post stuff.
Well, so I've had some issues with my computer, and so I'm kind of navigating roughly here. But when I can't get back to it right this second. But in my mind, when I looked at it, I didn't realize that they were talking about the guy that was the subject of the article, right? Sean Wiggins. I didn't realize that. And I thought, like, what is Wayne Brady doing on this page, right? And then, so I look, because I really like Wayne Brady, and Whose Line Is It Anyways?
Yeah.
And when I looked, I was like, oh, wait, that's not him. That's this dude, right? I was very surprised. But yeah, to me, he looked a little like him, but I can't really get back to it to double check. But my first impression was, what is Wayne Brady doing on this screen?
Yeah, he's all over the place. Like, I can't make sense of like what he's doing, but I would agree with the Wayne Brady look. I mean, he's got kind of that look going. I went back and looked through videos of him talking where he was running for different stuff up in that area, like running for office and stuff. He's an odd one. Overall, I found it shocking that I had LinkedIn people in common with him, and I was like, what? It was so strange to me that was a thing. It's been a really long time since he, like when I scrolled through his resume, he basically has this period where he claimed to be a U.S. government representative from 1988 to 1997.
What is that even? Oh, a representative like in Congress?
No. Like his. Okay, so basically, it pops up, and I wish I could find it again because it kind of disappeared on me. But it has his education is out of like Southern University, and then it said that he was a master's candidate at Harvard, maybe. And then he had all these like volunteering things that he did and a bunch of different stuff. But if you clicked on his like resume for experience, it basically said he was an appropriations committee clerk from 1987 to 1988, and then a representative of the U.S. government worldwide from 1988 to 1997, and then a managing principal of Washington Consulting Alliance from 97 to 2000. 2000 to 2003, he was a senior consultant with Issue Dynamics out of D.C. And then it said that he was deputy director of public affairs for the Office of the Inspector General for a year, 2003 to 2004. And then he pops back up as the vice president of marketing for Cosmetic Dentistry Group out of Dayton, Ohio for the next 2 years. And then he moves over to Shell Corporation for 8 years or something. I could not get a good read on what this guy was doing in the world. And that's why I was bringing it up at the end, because I was like, this guy is interesting as hell.
He's something.
Anyways, well, we'll see what happens with that one. But thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
that's exactly right. Now, in some of the pictures, he doesn't really look like Wayne Brady, but one of them, it was a social media post that somebody had like screenshotted, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think he had like a blue shirt on, and
that's his old LinkedIn profile. It's not there anymore, but I saw that too.
Well, I looked and I was like, "Why is Wayne Brady doing here?" Because I was like, "What is happening?" And then I realized it was that guy because the initial picture was like it's like almost like a comic. I didn't know
it had some kind of graphic run over it.
And so I didn't see his face initially.
Somewhere in here, I thought he looked a little like Courtney B. Vance when he was talking about like running for office or whatever. I do not get a good read on him. Like, I don't get a positive read on him. And usually, I don't know. I'm not going to get into the whole like is he or is he not. I think people have found out that they can't verify your employment with the CIA except if you've done certain like publicly accountable positions with them. And I think people take advantage of that from time to time. And this could be that type of situation because that would have been sort of post Cold War nonsense going on with him.
Yeah. So you kind of have to,
grain of salt it.
I was going to say, unless you're in this very particular position where, like the plaintiff in the case you're talking about against him, right? Where she was just really trying to get somewhere and he maneuvered his way in there. It really doesn't come up very often. It wouldn't even matter if somebody lied to you and said that they were, a CIA agent, right?
Right.
Unless you were like, yeah, you can't even like keep your shoes tied. So you want me to believe you're a CIA agent. All right, buddy. And, I don't argue with people like that. I'm just like, okay, sure, whatever. But like, so it would be like this really strange, like set of circumstances where it would even matter. But I think you're right. It is, who's going to verify that, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, give me the name of your supervisor. Well, I can't, it's a, what do they call it? It's classified.
Right, exactly. You can't. There is a way to verify certain positions through an HR number, but it doesn't tell you what they did or who they were. It would just tell you that they were an employee of the U.S. government. And I don't see that being something. I don't know. This guy he strikes me wrong, and I wanted. This is not my story, but I wanted to keep publicizing this story because people like this that pop up, just like you said earlier, they don't stop. So the more you can tell their story and share it.
And I was going to say they need to be stopped because, these are some of the worst. We don't really cover these types of crimes, especially not naming the victim or anything. But this kind of stuff destroys people's lives. And it's like for absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
A cloud over my windowsill. Some days I swear the weatherman is out for me. I've been locked inside thinking about sunlight. Woke up with the thought maybe it's all for naught. Maybe it's all for naught. Get me, you see, I'm just not into it. I'm broke down, exposed now. With low clouds, there's nothing to cover me. There's nothing to cover me. Think back to the times when the sky was clear. I had visions of launching to the atmosphere. Now here on the ground, waiting for departure. Think back to the day before the colors fade. The highs and the lows get me, you see. I'm cover me. There's nothing to cover me. When will the rain stop falling? When will I see the sun again? Sun again. When will the rain stop falling? When will I see the sun again? Sun again. The sun again. The highs and the lows get me, you see. I'm just not into it. I'm broke down, exposed now. With low clouds, there's nothing to cover me. The highs and the lows get me, you see. I'm just